This is Save Tonight by Eagle Eye Cherry. Every so often I like to pick out a song for my students where the chords repeat over and over and over throughout the song so that they can get practice doing the same chord changes over and over and work them up to speed. I like to choose songs that move particularly fast when this is the goal so that they can work them up to speed to the point where they kind of become experts at changing those chords. That's why I've chosen to teach you this song today. Let's get started. You're going to need to know 4 chords to play this song, those being A minor, F, C, and G5 in that order. That's A minor, F, C, and G5. Now, if you already know these chords, you can skip this part of the video and go to the next part where we just learned the sequence and a couple little embellishments and strumming things that sound like that, and put them to the song. But for now, we're just going to go over each chord individually, and then we're going to go from there. Okay, A minor. First finger. First fret, second string. Second and third fingers work as one unit, and they come over to the second fret on the 4th string and 3rd string. So that being second finger on 4th string and third on 3rd string. We're going to strum the 5th string open and also the open E, which is the 1st string open, to create this sound. So if your chord sounds like this, you're doing good. Stick with that idea. Okay, next we have the F chord. F is a kind of a challenging chord for a lot of beginners because you have to bar all 6 strings with your first finger. That means you have to press down on all 6 strings with your first finger at the same time while maintaining some kind of coordination with your other 3 fingers to fret the other 3 notes of the chord. Now, your first finger really only needs to hit the 1st string, 2nd string, and 6th string. What happens in the middle here doesn't matter. So if those notes aren't firmly planted, that's okay, because those strings are going to be covered by your 2nd, 3rd, and pinky. But you're definitely going to have to make it so that your first finger can cover all 3 of those strings. Then your second finger is going to come over here to the 2nd fret on the 3rd string, and your 3rd and pinky are going to work together to hit the 5th string and the 4th string, that being 3rd on 5th, pinky on 4th. And it should sound like that once you get it going. Now, a little hint here about bar chords. A lot of times if you're a beginner and you try to create them using your index finger first and then putting these down later, it can be a bit frustrating and kind of the hard way to approach it. Because for beginners, the tendency is to kind of have the wrist out here and kind of point towards the strings and try to manipulate things with their hands, because they're not used to, you know, pressing down strings and getting their fingers down onto certain points of the fretboard all at the same time, because they're still kind of negotiating with this coordination thing of, oh my gosh, I have to put my finger here while it doesn't touch this string, while this one does touch the other string, and how am I going to make this happen? I see that all the time with my students. Now, the best way to approach it is actually to work with your weaker fingers first, your less dominant fingers. That meaning we're going to approach it with our 3rd and pinky on these 2 strings, then put our 2nd finger down, and that's going to put our wrist in the right position to kind of do this thing. And then finally get your 1st finger and create the rest of the chord. So keep in mind here that it's always easier to stretch from your weakest fingers to your strongest fingers rather than approach it the other way. See how awkward that looks? Not the best way to approach it. So start with your weaker fingers and move towards your stronger fingers. So there's our F chord. So far we have A minor to F. Next up is C. Now C is a 5-string chord, meaning that we're going to strum just from the 5th string down. And the way we want to approach this one is use our first finger on the 1st fret on the 2nd string, our second finger on the 2nd fret on the 4th string, and our 3rd finger on the 3rd fret on the 5th string. Just like this. We're going to strum from the 5th string down, so our open strings are going to be the 3rd string and the 1st string. So if your C chord sounds like that, you're in good shape. It's time to move on to G5. G5 is a real common chord. We hear it in just about every song that has open chords. So if you're learning it today, chances are you're going to be able to use it for a lot of other songs too. For G5, we start with our 3rd and pinky on the 2nd string and 1st strings. 3rd being on 2nd, pinky being on 1st, both on the 3rd fret. 1st finger is going to come over here to the 2nd fret on the 5th string. And 2nd finger is going to come over here to the 3rd fret on the 6th string. And then we strum from the 6th string all the way through the 1st string. It should sound like that. Real sweet sounding chord. So what we have when we put it all together is A minor, F, C, and G5. And that's the sequence to the song. Okay, here's the fun part where we introduce the strum to the song. If you thought the F chord in the earlier part of the video was tricky, then you're in for a real treat here, because the right hand is just as tricky as far as the strumming goes. What I'm going to do is play it up to speed so you can watch my right hand here do the strumming, and then we're going to break it down to the nuts and bolts of it and work on things slowly, work them up to speed, then play it along with the song. So here's that strum at the speed the Eagle-Eye Cherry plays it. Pretty quick, huh? I don't think moving my hand so fast at that speed really translates too well to video. So it probably was kind of hard to pick up anything from that if you're a beginner. So let's break it down. So this is what it sounds like slow. One more time through. So there's a little bit of muting in there, which is when you hit the strings and there's not necessarily anything going on with your left hand. Your right hand is moving across the strings and your left hand isn't really pressing any notes, and in many cases actually muting them with an extra finger here or there to make sure that the notes don't ring out. So it's more of a percussive thing to drive the rhythm of the song a little bit. So what we have here is a strum that's primarily driven by a series of mutes placed between each chord change. Here are those real choppy, kind of muted strum between each chord, which is an up, down, up. So we have a chord, up, down, 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 up, down, down, down. So what you probably gathered from that example, what we have is down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down. Now what we're doing for the mutes in between the those little that we hear is we're muting partially with our left hand by moving our hand as we switch the chords. Hear how as I switch the chords, all the strings kind of go somewhere they really sound bad if you play it slowly. It sounds pretty bad, right? So if we play it slowly, that's part of the reason why we like to mute it when it's played quickly, and part of the reason why you play it so quickly. Because when you play it really quickly, those kind of fuzzy, scruffy notes that can sound terrible when it's played slowly all of a sudden disappear and everything sounds kind of rhythmic. So with the left hand, really what we're doing is kind of damage control as we switch the chords. And using a little bit of the strings that might have been ringing open to kind of float us into the next chord and fill up some of the space there where if we were to switch strictly from chord to chord, things could sound kind of awkward. I mean, that sounded pretty awkward, what I just played. So if you keep it a little more relaxed, even if the chord changes are slower, it's going to sound like the rhythm floats a little more steadily and a lot less awkward than it would if you were playing it straight. So on to the right hand part of the muting. What I'm doing here is kind of getting the strings with the heel of my hand as I strum across them. So what's happening with this particular song, we have like so we have up, down, up, mute, mute, up, down, up, mute, mute, up, down, up, mute, mute. And that muted note you hear on the upstroke as the song goes by very quickly is actually achieved by having the left hand changing the chord and kind of not really hitting any of the strings precisely that I spoke about just a little bit earlier. So between the right hand muting and the left hand muting, you can get some really cool things to happen. Here it is again, slow. Maybe now that I'm playing it like this, it makes a little more sense now that you've studied the muting as to what's going on. I'll play through it a few more times so you can really take a good look at how things coordinate between the right and left hands. And now we'll wrap it up. So I hope that helps with the strumming element of it and also with putting both the right hand and left hand parts together in coordination. Now that we've learned about the strumming and the chord changes, let's go on to some of the finer points of the song. There's a couple embellishments that Eagle Eye Cherry uses to accentuate the chord changes as he goes from chord to chord rhythmically. What I mean by that is when you hear these little notes, here comes another one. They kind of move the chord sequence along and take away a little of the monotony of just so between the series of left hand mutes, right hand mutes, speed at which this is played, and also these embellishments, we've taken a pretty dull chord progression actually made it sound kind of interesting, even though it's going to be played for about 3.5 minutes straight. So let's go ahead and look at these embellishments, and then we'll take the whole song from there. Okay, we had our A minor chord. What we're going to do here is take our third finger, and as we do our first strum, instead of fretting it from the beginning, hammering it after our first strum to the position it should be in the chord. Now, if it's a little hard for you to do that with one finger, you can always just do two. In fact, I think that's what he does sometimes in the song. So there's kind of a combination going on in there of the one finger thing and other times the two finger thing, depending on the vibe of what's going on at that particular rhythmic moment in time. When we move to the F, nothing fancy going on there, just the F chord. When we move to the C, real similar thing happening, except here our second finger becomes the finger that hammers from an open string to a fretted note, that being the second fret. And then G5, nothing spectacular there, just plain old G5. So what we have is an embellishment, plain chord, embellishment, G5. Throw in a few mutes. And we've got something pretty cool. So now let's put it all together and play along with the whole song.